rent may be a valid portion of your portfolio, but I want you to understand it's in the non-guaranteed column. It's in the non-safe secure. You might think because the houses are made of bricks and mortar or wood that they're secure, but the construction has nothing to do with the fact of your ability to hold on to that and to get steady, consistent income. Hey folks, this is Colin Richards, president of Lord & Richards, and I am once again excited to be talking to you about top questions answered. Do I have enough to retire? Do I have enough guarantees to retire? And that's a big word, guarantee. We shy away from that in financial services, but I want you to know it is possible to have guarantees. And it's just dependent on what those guarantees are backed by. In our previous segment, I talked about a few sources of income that people think might be guaranteed that aren't, such as Treasury inflation-protected securities, because those fluctuate in value, it's non-guaranteed. And typically the payout is lower than what you might get on other sources. So you're having to sock away more money. Dividends, well, companies can come crashing down. They can stop paying their dividends. It is non-guaranteed. And then distributions from packaged products like REITs, real estate investment trusts, are not guaranteed. Nobody is guaranteeing that that business venture, that collection of corporate or residential real estate is going to be solvent. And as we learned in years past, real estate is a non-guaranteed income source. And while I'm talking about that, let's add in another real estate source. How about rent? You know, sometimes people, they hang out at parties and get-togethers with friends, church, whatever, and so-and-so, we'll call him Mr. Big Bucks, has invested in property all his life. And so now he is dependent upon that rental income, the income he gets from renting out. So when Mr. Big Bucks does this, of course, it seems very impressive to those around. And by the way, don't hear me saying you shouldn't or couldn't have rent as a part of your income. But I want you to understand something. It is a non-guaranteed income source. And when we're trying to retire and never go back to work, that's the objective, then non-guaranteed income sources need to be backed up somehow. You need something backed up. And so let me tell you a little story. We'll call his name Jed. A little take on the Beverly Hillbillies for those of you who got that. But you know what? Jed came to me years ago. It was in the wake of the collapse of 2009. And many of you don't realize that real estate started heading down even before the markets did. The real estates predicted this collapse because of the way that people were allowed to borrow with almost no credit. And this gentleman came to me and he sat down and he said, I need to redesign my whole plan for the rest of my life. And I was like, wow, what happened? He said, well, I had built up and built up and built up, and I had $12 million in properties. $12 million, a lot of multifamily apartment buildings, that kind of thing. Very impressive when you're getting together at parties and in the backyard, right? Well, that whole empire came crashing down on him. Usually this is because people are leveraged, right? And in real estate, if you listen to the radio and you follow real estate people, they're always going to tell you, borrow money to buy your real estate. Well, that's fine. That's capitalism, but you've got to understand the risks. And sometimes people invest in real estate who not only shouldn't be taking the risk, but do not have the wherewithal should the risk transpire to recover from that. In other words, bankruptcy. And this fine gentleman had done everything right and was bankrupt, completely wiped out. And in the end, he asked me for a job. It was a tough story because at this point, people are talking a lot about passive income. I follow Keith Cunningham. He's a fantastic business guru. He's spoken on the stage for Tony Robbins, and he makes some great points. There is no such thing as passive income, right? Income is either physical labor or intellectual labor is behind it. There's no such thing as passive, right? I'm just sitting here on a beach. Those things have to be monitored. From a biblical standpoint, the Bible says, know well the state of your flocks. And so sometimes my clients who have just saved in their 401k or have pensions and Social Security get a little jealous of these people that have all these properties. And I want you to know something. Don't be. They've taken on a certain amount of risk. That is a non-guaranteed source if you have rent. And if you have exposure, debt on that property, you are double exposed, right? Because number one, the debt could become a problem for you if the income, number two, isn't serviced, right? It's one thing to own the property free and clear, have just expenses and taxes related to that, which can be onerous these days. We know we've had a big tax increase. It's one thing to have that and lose your rent. It's another thing to also compound that with a mortgage and then lose the property. And so folks, recognize that rent may be a valid portion of your portfolio, but I want you to understand it's in the non-guaranteed column. It's in the non-safe secure. You might think because the houses are made of bricks and mortar or wood that they're secure, but the construction has nothing to do with the fact of your ability to hold on to that and to get steady, consistent income. What do we have out there that people say is, well, this is really guaranteed? Well, there's one more category I think there's some confusion about, and that is corporate pensions. And I want you to hear me. That is a blessing. If you have one of those, if you've worked for a company for years and been given a pension, that's a great blessing to you. First of all, when the lump sum does not, it is bigger than would be warranted for taking the income, I would take the lump sum. We have a calculation we can do for you. Lately, a lot of pensions have been paying out pretty well. And so when the income is greater than what the lump sum can do for you, then take the income. But here's something I want you to do, especially if you've got a gap between the ages of you and your spouse, is I want you to take joint income. That becomes even more critical the bigger the gap, because the likelihood of somebody passing away early, and if it's the man and he dies early, which we tend to do, you could leave your wife, if you took a single life pension, you could leave your wife financially disabled. But here's the thing, corporate pensions aren't guaranteed either. You say, this company's been around forever. Let me tell you, the stories go on and on. How about United? United and Continental merged. I could tell you story after story of my airline employees that we serve who had their pensions whacked because those companies are still going, right? Not Continental, but United absorbed it, and United's still going. Why didn't they make good on their pension? Well, they got out of it, and the Pension Guarantee Association had to come in. And today, United is strong and making money, and people who work for these companies for years are getting pennies on the dollar for their pension. Folks, we've got to back up our non-guaranteed sources. So I'm going to tell you how to do that in our very next segment. We've had 2 segments on non-guaranteed, but it's so important that we get our mindset right and stop calling non-guaranteed income sources guaranteed. So in our next segment, I'm going to bring you hope, and I'm going to give you some tremendous steps you can take. But it really begins with a conversation at Lord & Richards. We're helping people like you every single day to retire financially independent, and I can't wait to talk to you. Just takes a phone call.